Okay, my name is Ray Johnston, born and bred in BrokenHill, and grandparents used to have...
Sorry, could you speak up just a little? The line is right there.
I might ask you the same thing. I've got a hearing problem,
Okay.
and one of the batteries have gone flat.
Okay. Well, we can yell at each other.
Okay.
Thank you.
Look, I came here more to listen to other people than to stand up here, and I certainly haven't got the information that the previous gentleman's had, but all I can sort of tell you is from my own private experience, which is pretty limited, I suppose. But look, I can remember back in the mid-50s when we used to go to the river every weekend. When the river was low, and we went up there camping one weekend, and I can remember this vividly, that the water, and I was about an 8-year-old, the water was up to my waist at the time. I could see my toes in the bottom of the water and yabbies crawling around the bottom of it. The water was so clear and clean at that time. If you wanted a cup of tea, and you've probably heard these stories from other people, but there was nothing wrong with the water. It was absolutely beautiful water. You could drink it straight out of the river, or boil a billy, or whatever you wanted to do. I have an on-site van and boat at Kopi Hollow, and we've been there for probably since the very early 80s. And I couldn't tell you the exact year, but around that time, not long after we joined the club, we noticed that we'd heard reports that it had rained in Queensland, and that the water was coming down the river. Now, normally, as you probably know, it takes 3 to 4 months to get down to Menindee. So all of a sudden, this water was down here within 3 to 4 weeks, and we thought, that's a bit strange. What's going on? Doesn't, can't possibly, they can't put the foot on the accelerator. So a number of people noticed the same thing, and after they eventually found out that the cotton growers had also known that the water was coming down the river. They had let all of their rubbish water go with all the nutrients in it, and were taking all of the fresh stuff. And that's gone on for years and years and years. And I'm sure that it's all of the chemicals and the nutrients that they're putting back into the river. And to me, I'm pretty sure that would be illegal, that they're allowed to do that, because it's pollutant. And I think they should be taken to task. I think there's a lot of corruption that's been going on, and you can't really make direct accusations, but I'm sure that those involved know who they are, and there's been a number of resignations, as you probably know, because I think they're trying to get out before the ship sinks. And I think that to fix it, they've just got to stop these people taking the water out of the river at times when they shouldn't be taking it. The bottom end of the river, dies from the bottom up. Any river dies from the bottom up and has been dying for a long time. There are a couple of other things that have really got onto my nerves is the fact that the cotton growers have been given 12 months before they have to have their meters on. Why? Why is it taking that long? Why have they been given that long? Why did Barnaby Joyce approve the sale of water to $78 million when it was only worth 30-something? There are questions that have to be answered, and those people should be taken to task and taken to court and prosecuted, because I think there's just too much of that illegal activity going on. And I'd like to see it stopped, and that's probably about all I've got to say.
Thank you for sharing that. But before you go, in the time that you've been watching the water, like all other people in the community, do you feel that this particular patch of dryness and lack of water is different to the past? Well, we've been hearing from other people that this time feels worse than other droughts because of the mismanagement. In what you're watching, when do you feel like in these last few years, we hear different folks say since about 2000, or particularly since 2012, the condition of country and water has just been much poorer.
Look,
is that your experience?
I think the whole thing has been pre-planned for many years to try and be able to be in a position to shift the water from the Menindee Lakes into their cotton dams up the top there. And they talk about evaporation, and that really, really gets up my nose. When you used to hear the cotton growers and the politicians talk about evaporation of the Menindee Lakes, you would think that the Menindee Lakes was the only place in the world that evaporation occurred. And they talk about the shallowness of the lakes. They're not that shallow. The average depth is 5.5 metres. I don't consider that to be shallow. And so, you know, when you go down to Victoria and a couple of those lakes down south in South Australia, some of them are shallow, only a couple of metres. But, you know, I mean, I've done a lot of swimming in those lakes in the hot weather. And when you're in the water out in the middle of those lakes, then you've only got about 1 foot to 18 inches of warm water, and then it's cold. And so, you know, it doesn't really matter too much. You know, the Menindee Lakes, of course, a lot of evaporation takes place. I can remember when the lakes were first completed, and I don't know if they were ever opened, but I was only a kid, about 10, 11, 12 years old or something, till about 10 years old I was. And they had a gentleman come around to the primary schools, where we were spoken to, and he at the time said that these lakes are going to change our weather patterns because of the evaporation. They'll create more rain in the area. I don't know whether that's actually happened or not, but I'll tell you a funny little bit. There was one, he asked for questions, and one of our girls in our class asked, was there going to be any sharks in the lakes? So that was obviously the question. Yeah.
So the water systems at the moment do seem different to other droughts?
Completely. This has been a big plan to shift the water storage from Menindee back up there so that they can use it up there, and they just don't give a damn about the people down below. And you know, there's people in public service positions and politicians that I think are right in the middle of it, with their hands behind their back, taking whatever's been handed out. And I think they should be called out on it and prosecuted, because they're no different to you and I. And as far as the pollution goes, well, then I'm sure that if that river was alongside a city somewhere, they'd have been dobbed in many, many years ago with the stuff that they're putting back into the river, because it's poison. You can't drink it, you can't wash in it, you can't do anything with it. The stock can't even drink it now at the moment. And I've never ever seen blue-green algae in the river in my whole entire life until they started doing that, what they're doing up there. And we used to go up there every weekend.
Yeah. How do you and your family feel about the future out here now?
Look, I have to say the pipeline's probably got some advantages, but I think, I suppose whoever gets in government this weekend will probably get a better idea of what the future's going to hold for it. But I would like to think that even if the Liberal National Party got back in again, that they've probably learned their lesson, and they might at least do something about it. But they're in denial. They just don't believe, and they will not accept the fact that it's their mismanagement that's caused this, and that's what it is. It's their mismanagement and corruption that's been going on that's caused this. And what really I get concerned about is that it's really only it's not all of the cotton growers, it's focusing on just a few of the bigger companies, big corporations. And the other thing that I think that I really do worry about is the land that's being cleared for cotton growing. I'm not 100% sure whether it's accurate or not, but they tell me that at some point in time in the future, when the land will eventually become no good for growing cotton, it becomes infertile, and you can't do anything with it. So what are we going to do with that land then?
It's a very good question.
So there's thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of it. And the other thing, I'll just finish up on saying that there are reports I've heard lately of of new cotton farms springing up down along the Murray River. And I mean, they're going to be in the same boat in that area too if they let that go ahead. There's got to be put a stop to it. We shouldn't be growing cotton in Australia. And the other thing that's coming out too now is the growing of almonds, the amount of water that they take. Yeah, that's shocking. 3 litres of water to one almond. It's just ridiculous. We've got
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay.